Hi and welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be looking at two parts of group policy. The first one will be the account lockout policy, which we're going to be editing the default domain policy once again to incorporate this into our domain. And the second one we will be creating a new group policy, which will be for the machine interactive logon or inactivity timer, which is where a machine is left unattended for a period of time and it will automatically lock the device. If we jump straight into what we're looking at, we're going to open up our group policy management just here, and we can see that if we expand our group policy objects, we'll see that we have the default domain controllers policy and also the default domain policy, and these are obviously linked to the relevant locations. So the default domain controllers policy is linked to the domain controllers OU, and the default domain policy is at top level, and as we discussed previously, anything at top level will then be inherited via all those further down the hierarchy. You can prevent some of this by doing disabling inheritance, but you can then also override that with enforcement and other options, but we'll cover those options in another video. For now, we're not going to have any blocked inheritance or anything, and we're going to go ahead and edit this default domain policy. So we're going to go ahead and right click, and we're going to go ahead and click edit. We're just going to expand this out to full screen and bring the sidebar out slightly. And very similar to the password policy that we set, it's a similar location. So we're going to go into computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, security settings, and then account policies. From here we can see that we have the password policy that we previously amended, and we can also see the account lockout policy just here. At this point, we can see there are three options available. So there's the account lockout duration, the account lockout threshold, and the reset account lockout counter after. These three policies are intrinsically linked, and when we edit one, the others will then be presented to us as possible settings to be applied. So we're going to go ahead and select account lockout duration in the first instance. We're going to open that up. And we're going to go ahead and we can see that the security policy settings is currently not defined as the tick box is not ticked. And if we go ahead and click on the explain tab, this will explain what this actual policy does. And we can see from the first options here that this security setting determines the number of minutes a locked out account remains locked out before automatically becoming unlocked. The available range for this is from 0 minutes through to 99,999 minutes. And if you set the account lockout duration to 0, the account will be locked until an administrator explicitly unlocks it. What this is effectively saying is once an account becomes locked out, it will wait a predefined number of minutes before the account is automatically unlocked. But if we set it to 0 minutes, then that account will have to be unlocked via another administrator. As we continue on, we'll see that if an account lockout threshold is defined, the account lockout duration must be greater than or equal to the reset time. Furthermore, the default to this is none, because this policy setting only has meaning when an account lockout threshold is specified. So what we can do is we can go back to the security policy settings here, and we can click on define this policy setting. When we do that, the default Microsoft standard will pop in, and we can see that the account is locked out for 30 minutes. Now, this particular part here can be amended, as we mentioned, anything between 0 and 99,999. However, it would be a good idea to speak with either the security officer or to the compliance team to ensure that any setting that is set here complies with any compliance or ISO policy standards or security standards the company is trying to adhere to. And in the link in the description, there'll be some links to the UK cybersecurity side, which is one of the more common ones that a lot of companies are trying to or attempting to maintain, as that gives a level of confidence to other companies as well. The same with ISO standards. There are certain policies that can be put in place which demonstrates that as a company you're attempting to protect the network. For this particular example though, we're going to leave this as a default, which is in this case 30 minutes, and we're going to click apply. And when we click apply, what will happen is the remaining two options, the account lockout threshold and the reset account lockout counter after, will be brought up, and they'll say that the current policy setting is not defined, and it will provide a suggested setting. And that's, as we mentioned, because these are all intrinsically linked together. Now, for the purpose of this example, we're going to leave these as the default, but once again reach out to the corresponding people and teams to make sure that they adhere to the standards that the company need to maintain. But we're going to go ahead and click OK, and then we're going to click OK here. And what we'll see is the account lockout duration, threshold, and also the reset account lockout counters now are now all set to the specified amounts. Now that we've amended this part of the policy, we can go ahead and close the editor. We can perform a refresh on our group policy objects. We can select default domain policy, we can go to settings, and once the report's generated, we can click on show all. As we scroll down, we can find that the computer configuration, policies, window settings, security settings, and then we have our account policies, and we can see the account lockout policy is now listed in this group policy. And we can see that this mirrors what we've set currently. Now that the policy is set, we're going to reboot the endpoint devices so that they pick up the new group policy, and then we're going to go ahead and demonstrate what happens when a user attempts to log in now that this policy is taken effect. So if we now move to our endpoint devices, what we're going to do is we're going to restart these endpoints just so they update with the new group policy. And once they've restarted, we're then going to go ahead and test the policy. So first endpoint has restarted, and we can see that the user here is Eli. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and log in with Eli with an incorrect password. And we're going to do this very simply just by typing in the wrong details twice, 3 times, 4, 5. Now on the 6th attempt, when we try it, what will happen is this will talk back to Active Directory. It will realize that it's hit the threshold, and at this point here it will present us with a message to demonstrate that the account is now locked out. You may find that this does take a moment to log in after multiple attempts at logging in. That's perfectly normal behavior, unfortunately, with the way the systems are, and it may just take a moment for that to catch up. But as we can now see, we now get the message of the referenced account is currently logged out and may not be logged onto. So if we go ahead and click OK, this user will no longer be able to log in. And we can try that again one more time with attempting to log in, and we'll see that the account is still locked out and this user will not be able to log in. And once again we're presented with the error message of the reference account being currently locked. So we can go ahead and click OK to that. Now once this has happened, we can either wait for the duration of time for the account to become unlocked. In this case that was 30 minutes that we've set on the policy, or we can have an administrator manually unlock the account. For the purpose of this video, we're going to manually unlock the account by going back to our Active Directory domain controller, and we're going to open up our Active Directory users and computers. We're going to go ahead and find our user, in this case Eli, and when we double click on Eli with the properties dialog box open, when we click on account, what we'll see is that there's now an option that says unlock account with a tick box next to it, and it will say that this account is currently locked out on this Active Directory domain controller. As a side note to this, in the current example network that we've built so far, we have a single domain controller. When you go into slightly more larger networks or more redundant networks, you will have multiple domain controllers. It's important to understand that when a user authenticates to a Active Directory domain controller, it will talk to a particular one, usually based on location from within sites and services and other parts of the domain that it looks up. And when the account is initially locked out on the first domain controller, it will then replicate across after that to the other sites. So there can be a delay before all the domain controllers have caught up with each other. The same is true when we unlock an account. So we're going to go ahead and click the tick box here and unlock the account and click apply, and then we're going to go ahead and click OK. And we can now immediately reopen this user's properties dialog box, click on account, and we'll see the account is no longer locked out. As mentioned, this will now replicate across to the other domain controllers or other Active Directory roles servers that have the features on there, roles and features present, and it may take a moment for that account to become unlocked. The reason this is worthwhile noting is if you have IT administrative staff that log on to either a different domain controller or possibly use RSAT tools that will follow up within other videos, there may be a delay before that user can log back into the device. The way around this would be to log into the domain controller that had the account locked out in the first instance to unlock it there, so it then replicates from that location. However, again, just for reference, it's worth noting that there could be a delay, and depending on the size of the organization and the number of servers involved, it could take a short period of time for that to replicate across. In this example though, we've now unlocked the account, and we can go back to our endpoint device, and we can try and log in with Eli, this time with the correct password. And there we have the user now logged in. And now we're going to go ahead and test this on another device with another user. So we're going to go on to our second endpoint, and we're going to attempt to log in with Mervyn. In the first instance, we're going to log in with the correct credentials, and we're going to demonstrate that the login process is still working as it should be. And then we're going to log out and attempt to log in with the incorrect credentials. So we can see we've now logged in. We're now going to go ahead and sign out of this user. And now we're going to attempt to log in with the incorrect credentials. So in the first instance, attempt number 1, password is incorrect. Attempt number 2, incorrect. Attempt number 3, incorrect. Attempt number 4, incorrect. Attempt number 5, incorrect. Now on attempt number 6, this is when we expect the account to lock out. And it should present us with a message that says this referenced account is now locked out, and to contact the administrator accordingly. There we go. The reference account is currently locked out and may not be logged onto. So we can go ahead and click OK. And what we can do now is we can go back to the domain controller, our Active Directory, users and computers. We can find Mervyn. And if we open the properties dialog box for Mervyn, we'll see the exact same message as before. The account is currently locked out. So we can unlock this manually by ticking the box and clicking Apply and clicking OK. We can go back to that endpoint device. And if we try and log in now, this time with the correct password, that will now let us log in and present us with the user's desktop. Now that we've created and tested the account lockout policy, we're going to create a new group policy and apply that to our endpoint and servers, and that will be the machine inactivity timeout. Particularly useful for security reasons, as it will force a user to enter their credentials once they attempt to log back into the device. So if the machine is left unattended for any reason and the user hasn't locked the machine, it will automatically force that over that. So to do this, we're going to jump back to our domain controller, and we're going to open up our group policy management console. And from here, we're going to expand our group policy objects, and we're going to create a new object. And to do that, we're going to right click on group policy objects and select new. First thing that's going to happen is we're going to be presented with a new GPO screen, and it's going to ask us for a name. Now, although we're going to call this machine inactivity timeout, we can also specify that it's effectively a screensaver also. So we're just going to specify that in the brackets there. We're going to go ahead and click OK to create that. We will cover group policy in a bit more in depth as to how we can do naming conventions. We can also do filtering and other bits and pieces in later videos. But for now, we're just going to create this particular policy and apply it to the top level. So once we've created that policy, we can go ahead and select it. And we'll see that currently the scope is 0, so it's not applied anywhere in the domain. This means we can create the policy in the first instance. We can then move on to testing before moving to production deployment. Again, we'll cover how we can assign these to particular OUs in additional videos when we cover group policy a bit more. But for now, we're going to right click and we're going to go ahead and edit. This will bring up the group policy management editor, and we're just going to expand these out slightly. Now, unlike the previous policy that we've looked at, which was the computer configuration side, this is actually a user configuration. So we're going to go to our user configuration option. We're going to expand that out and we're going to select on the policies, and then we're going to select administrative templates. And these are predefined templates that we can use, which makes it a little bit easier. Once you've expanded that out, we're going to go ahead and select control panel, and then we're going to go down to where it says personalization. And from here, these are the options that are available to us within this particular policy or within this administrative template. As a side note, the administrative templates or the ADMX files can be downloaded, or additional updates can be downloaded directly from Microsoft. We'll be sure to link that into the description as well, as there are some additional ones that you may not have on your current machines where they're just older versions and you want to get the newer templates available. However, for this example, we're just going to go through the options that we need to enable. So first of all, there are 3 options that we need to enable in order to ensure that the machine is locked after a period of time. The first option is the enable screensaver. The second option is to password protect the screensaver. And the third option is the screensaver timeout. And as long as we enforce these 3 options, then after whatever set time that we specify, the machine will then move to screensaver, but it will also lock the machine. So to start with, we're going to double click on the enable screensaver, and we can see that the current option is not configured. We can also see that we have some additional help just here, and if we want to read through this, this will tell us exactly what's going to happen. So enable desktop screensavers. If you disable this setting, screensavers do not run. Also, this setting disables the screensaver section of the screensaver dialog in the personalization or display control panel. As a result, users cannot change the screensaver options. If you do not configure it, this setting has no effect on the system. If you do enable it, a screensaver runs, provided the following 2 conditions hold. First, a valid screensaver on the client is specified through the screensaver executable name, setting, or through control panel on the client computer. Second, the screensaver timeout is also set to a non-zero value through the setting or control panel. And then it will also say prevent changing screensaver settings, which we won't cover in this one, but for now, just to be aware of. So we can see that this is currently not configured, and that means that effectively the users have control over that at the moment. Now we're going to go ahead and enable this option, and when we do that, we're going to go ahead and click apply, and then we're going to click OK. And we can see now on the options here, we can see the enable screensaver is now set to enabled. Secondly, we're going to go down and we're going to password protect the screensaver. So we're going to select that option, open that one up, and we're just going to have a quick read through these, and then we're going to specify exactly what we're going to select. So we can see the options available to us here are determines whether screensavers used on the computer are password protected. So if you enable this setting, all screensavers are password protected. If you disable this setting, password protection cannot be set on any screensaver. This setting also disables the password protected checkbox on the screensaver dialog in the personalize or display control panel, preventing users from changing the password protection setting. If you do not configure this option, users can choose whether or not to set password protection on each screensaver. To ensure that a computer will be password protected, enable the enable screensaver setting and specify a timeout via the screensaver timeout setting. Note, to remove the screensaver dialog, use the prevent changing screensaver setting. So as we can see here, if we click on enabled and apply, that will now force the password protect screensaver to take effect. That also means that once this is enabled, all the screensavers are password protected and the user cannot amend that policy on the local device. So once that's now enabled, we're going to go ahead and click OK. And finally, the last option we need to look at is the screensaver timeout. So we're going to double click on this option and we'll have a quick run through here. So we can start from here underneath the help, It specifies how much user idle time must elapse before the screensaver is launched. When configured, the idle time can be set from a minimum of 1 second to a maximum of 86,400 seconds or 24 hours. If set to 0, the screensaver will never be started. This setting has no effect under any of the following circumstances. This setting is disabled or not configured, the wait time is 0, or the enable screensaver setting is disabled. Now, as we know from the first option, we have actually already enabled the screensaver, so we know that this will meet the criteria for this to take effect. If we scroll down, the last one there is neither the screensaver executable name setting nor the screensaver dialog of the client's computer's personalization or display control panel specifies a valid existing screensaver program on the client. When not configured, whatever wait time is set on the client through the screensaver dialog in the personalization or display control panel is used. The default is 15 minutes. And that's the default client-side option. For us though, we're going to go ahead and enable this, as we know we've met the prerequisites so far. And when we do click enable, we're going to be asked for the number of seconds to wait until the screensaver is active. As we can see, the current number is 900 seconds, and as we know, that's the specified default amount, which is 15 minutes, which is also the client side. Again, as we discussed previously in the video, it's a good idea to engage with either the security or the compliance team to make sure that we set this to mirror what is ever required via either the security standards or the compliance ISO standards that the company are trying to adhere to. In our particular example, we're going to go for a 5-minute lockout just for the example, so we're not using the 900. And that means that we'll be setting this to 300 seconds. So we can go ahead and edit this to 300. We can click apply. Again, 5 minutes is quite a short time, but again, depending on the scenario, and just for this particular example, we're going to stick to that. Once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and click OK. And what we'll see now is that we have the enable screensaver, and that's enabled. Password protect the screensaver, and that's enabled. And we also have the screensaver timeout, and that's also enabled. And we know we just set that to 300 seconds or 5 minutes. Once we've made these changes here, we can go ahead and close this page off. And if we refresh our group policy objects and select our machine inactivity timeout screensaver, we can go to settings, and this will generate the report which will demonstrate all of the options that we've set. And if we scroll down, we'll see that there is a user configuration, policies, administrative templates, and control panel or personalization. And we can see the enable screensaver, password protect, and screensaver timeout, and all the settings that we've selected or chosen are listed here. At this point, the last thing we need to do is apply this policy to either an OU or to the top level of the domain. You can do this with any group policy by selecting the location that you wish for it to be linked to, and then applying that policy. So for our example, we are going to list it or link it to the same level or the top level where the default domain policy is. So we're going to select the ad.msptech.co.uk domain. We're going to right click and we're going to select the link existing GPO. Alternatively, if we wanted to, we could create a GPO and link it here. The downside to this is if we make a mistake during the creation process and it does take effect, that could have ramifications on the network. So it's always a good idea to build these within the group policy objects and then apply once we know that they've been completed correctly. So we're going to go ahead and link an existing GPO. We're going to select that option, and it's going to look for it in this domain, which is fine, and it's going to ask us which one we wish to link. As we can see, we have machine inactivity timeout or screensaver. We can select that and we can go ahead and click OK. What now happens is we have a shortcut or link to the top level where it lists our new group policy object, and as the top level filters down to all the lower ends, or the lower OUs inherit what's above it, we know that this particular policy is going to apply to not only all of the computer accounts, user accounts in any of the OUs beneath it, but across the entirety of the network. We can also go ahead and test this now by updating the group policy on our endpoint devices and awaiting the 5-minute lockout time and then attempting to log back in. So to do that, we're going to log into our first endpoint device, and we're going to go ahead, we're actually going to restart the device in the first instance for the policy to take effect. And we're going to do that on both of our endpoints that we have listed here. And they're just going to restart. Once they've restarted, we're going to go ahead and log in with our users. And that's going to present us with the desktop again. Now, for the purpose of this demonstration, what I have done is I have disabled all of the power saving options just so that the machine doesn't turn off or go to sleep or standby. And I can just demonstrate that here. If we go to our control panel, and we go to our power options, you'll see that I've created a custom no power off power plan. And effectively all this is doing is preventing the screen from going to sleep and also preventing the computer from going to sleep, so we can demonstrate that the machine itself isn't attempting to go to sleep or anything, and that the 5-minute lockout will just apply that policy for the screensaver and the password protection to log back in. As I say, this is the same on both devices, so we can demonstrate that again on the second endpoint here as well. If we just go to our power options here, and we can see no power off, and once again same settings are applied. This is just for the purpose of this demonstration, but we will cover power settings in another video also. So now that we've logged in, what we'll do is we'll take note of the time, and we can see that it's 16:38 at the moment, and we're going to stop using these machines now, and we're going to pause the video and come back in approximately 4 minutes, and we're going to ensure that in the last moments the screensaver takes effect. So we've just paused the video for about 4 minutes so far, and we're just going to wait for the last moment. But what should happen is once the 5-minute window is up, the machine will kick to the screensaver on both devices, and then when we attempt to log in, we'll be presented with the password prompt. So it'll be the last few seconds now just as this catches up, and we're just going to wait for that to kick in. And there we go. So that's the screen blanking out and the screensaver or lock screen kicking in. And that's on the first endpoint. We'll give it a few more seconds just for the second endpoint to kick in also, if that hasn't already. And there we go, we can see that there. So if we go to endpoint 1 and we attempt to log in, we'll see that we're presented with the password prompt. And we can also do the same on endpoint 2. We can also validate to make sure that all these policies are taken effect by running a GP result, which we're going to do on the second endpoint just now. So we can right click on our start button, we can go to run, and from here we can type in either command prompt or we can go to PowerShell as well. From here we can type in GP result /R, this is the RSOP data, and when we press enter, what will happen is it will demonstrate all of the policies that have been applied. Now we know the policy has taken effect, but we can just validate it through here. Now because we run this as a non-administrative user, it will only show us the user profile side. And as we scroll down, what we should see is applied group policy objects, in this case machine inactivity timeout. We can also check this on endpoint 1 also. This time we'll run it as an administrator, so we'll right click the start button, and we'll go to PowerShell admin, which is fine, both work the same. We can click yes to the prompt, and we can do the exact same command, so GP result /R. This time what we'll see is additional parts of this, which is the machine-based policies as well, and we can scroll up, we'll see that that's there. So we can see the RSOP data for Eli, we can see the computer settings that have taken effect, and in this case we can see the default domain policies taken effect. And as we scroll down, we'll see that the user settings are here. And we can see the machine inactivity timeout screensaver has also taken effect. This completes the video on group policy objects for password policy lockout accounts or lockout attempts. After a certain number of invalid attempts have been attempted, it will lock the account out automatically, requiring either a wait in time before the account is automatically unlocked or a administrator to intervene to unlock the account manually. And we've also demonstrated a screensaver and lock screen for security policies as well by creating the new group policy, both of which are listed now in our group policy management here. As we can see, we have the default domain policy top level as well as our machine inactivity timeout. And this policy, as it is top level, will apply to all the devices, endpoints, etc. that are linked to the domain from the top level down. In additional videos, we'll be looking at additional group policy templates and group policy items that we can look to apply to ensure further security across the network, as well as other optional features that we can enable to get maximum efficiency out of the network.